I don't think no one else is going to fight for it the way we will.
That fight continues tonight as the parents of Ashlee Robinson press for answers as to what happened to their daughter who was found dead in Tanzania. Today, the two spent the day in Washington, D.C., trying to get information from the embassy. They spoke with Action News yesterday, saying they were getting nowhere.
No one wants to talk to us. Like, just let us know what happened. That's the only thing we want to know is the truth.
There is nothing that's confirmed. We don't have anything from the police or law enforcement that states that there is a conclusion to anything. It's under investigation, and it's under investigation because it doesn't look right.
Robinson, a 31-year-old social media influencer who went by Ashlee Jenae online, was found unresponsive in her hotel room in Zanzibar and declared dead April 9th. Police say they're investigating it as a possible suicide, but investigators in Tanzania said she had been in a fight with her fiancé, McCann, hours earlier, and the two were separated by hotel staff.
All right, all right, all right. What happened to Ashlee Jenae? The mystery of the Black American influencer being unalived in Zanzibar, Tanzania. Welcome to This Week in Africa, your weekly live stream where we talk about all things Africa related. We have a number of stories to go through today, including the story of Ashlee Jenae, the update, the parents wanting justice, the fiance questioned, a lot of mysterious things happening around her unalivement. We then have the story of Julius Malema being sentenced to 5 years in prison. The popular politician from South Africa. We have the Beninese opposition leader arrested in South Africa. Kenya, Uganda, and Egypt launch into space. The first U.S. deportees land in the DRC under Trump's deportation deal. And then lastly, we'll have some stories about Ibrahim Traoré. But before we do, let's get into introductions. So I'll turn it over to my co-host before I introduce myself. You're on mute.
She loves being on mute. Hi, everyone. My name is Gloria Ayo, and I am the founder of Diaspora Station, where we basically try to bridge Africa and the diaspora through history, news, culture, etc. You name it, we've got it. We're definitely happy to be back co-hosting This Week in Africa with the Joe Hotagwa.
Absolutely. And I am the aforementioned Joe Hotagwa, founder of Authentic African Media. We help people visit, move, and invest on the continent of Africa. We also do weekly stories about the countries of interest. So you know a little bit more about the locations you plan to visit, move, or invest in. So let's get into today's stories. As mentioned, there are a lot of questions around influencer Ashlee Jenae's death in Tanzania. So she was 31 years old. She was a U.S. social media influencer, and she was found unalived in her hotel room in Tanzania. And there's a lot of questions that people have, right? The local authorities had said that this was a parent's self-unaliving, self-deletion, I think is the way people use to say how they say it on these platforms, which you guys probably understand what that means, but because of the platform rules, we have to be careful about how we communicate these things. But she was found. The local authorities are investigating the circumstances, but this has a lot of questions associated with it just because, one, she was in an interracial relationship with a wealthy crypto, CEO. She was an influencer. She showed her life a lot. And this was a birthday trip and a proposal trip. The fact that they were separated has caused some questions. The hotel staff heard a loud argument. It got loud enough that the hotel staff were alerted and they were separated and put into different rooms. So the circumstances surrounding her unalivement are very iffy at best. So with that, we will get into the full story, and we will have some commentary on the other side.
We're learning new details tonight about the death of an influencer with local ties who was found dead while on vacation in Africa. Ashlee Robinson, who goes by Ashlee Jenae online, was on a birthday trip with her fiancé at the time.
Well, tonight we're learning her fiancé is still being questioned as Robinson's family desperately tries to find out what happened to her.
It is Tuesday night. Shari's off. Alicia Vitarelli is joining us. And the big story in Action News is the mysterious death of a South Jersey woman, now drawing international attention.
Now, tonight, we know new details from authorities about her death. She was on a vacation of a lifetime in Zanzibar, Tanzania, which is on the east coast of Africa. Action News reporter John Paul live in the Satellite Center now with the very latest, and the family desperate for answers, John.
Yeah, Alicia, Rick, they are desperate for those answers. Now, we did get some new information. We know that authorities in Tanzania have confiscated her fiance's passport. This is while he's still being questioned. But according to the BBC, local authorities there in Tanzania did not originally suspect him of any wrongdoing, while the family continues to be desperate to know what happened.
I don't think no one else is going to fight for it the way we will.
That fight continues tonight as the parents of Ashlee Robinson press for answers as to what happened to their daughter who was found dead in Tanzania. Today, the two spent the day in Washington, D.C., trying to get information from the embassy. They spoke with Action News yesterday, saying they were getting nowhere.
No one wants to talk to us. Like, just let us know what happened. That's the only thing we want to know is the truth.
There is nothing that's confirmed. We don't have anything from the police or law enforcement that states that there is a conclusion to anything. It's under investigation, and it's under investigation because it doesn't look right.
Robinson, a 31-year-old social media influencer who went by Ashlee Jenae online, was found unresponsive in her hotel room in Zanzibar and declared dead April 9th. Police say they're investigating it as a possible suicide. But investigators in Tanzania said she had been in a fight with her fiancé, Joe McCann, hours earlier, and the two were separated by hotel staff. He was moved to a different villa, which was about a 10-minute walk away from where she was staying. Her parents are now pushing for security footage from the Zuri Zanzibar hotel.
If there's security footage, that will tell the story. So we just want to know if there's any security footage, if there's anything just to saying that what he's saying is true.
The hotel hasn't responded to them, but did provide a brief statement to ABC News, saying they were deeply saddened by a tragic incident involving one of our guests. Tonight, the family's preparing to fly to Zanzibar to try to get answers in person.
I just know that I have to keep going forward. I'm never going to give up. And I just want the truth out there.
We did reach out to McCann.
All right, so we'll leave it there. I know that was a long video, but we wanted to kind of give you the full story for those of you who aren't aware. So Gloria, your thoughts on this story?
Yeah, I mean, really, really tragic. That's something that has obviously shaken the globe. And I do want to point out that this kind of stories, unfortunately, don't usually make the news, at least not at this scale. But because obviously there's an American involved, that's gotten even more attention. And of course, because of the whole the background, behind this whole situation, background such as obviously the fact that the man is Caucasian, Ashlee is Black. Also, people have gone on the internet and dug up things where they feel Ashlee may have, and it's hard for me to talk about this because I'm trying to be as sensitive as possible, because no matter what happens, I want to make it very clear she didn't deserve what happened to her.
Mm-hmm.
But people have now gone on social media to dig up chats or tweets where they alleged or stated that she was one of, there's like a movement for soft life and divestment, and just Black women being encouraged to seek a life of ease and luxury and things like that. So, we all have our thoughts on that part of the conversation, but I'm only pointing that out to show why, to give you an idea of part of why this story has gotten the kind of attention it's gotten. Now, regarding, obviously this is relevant to This Week in Africa because it happened in Africa. Mm-hmm. And, we get concerned around the whole conversation about white worship, as we call it. And in this particular instance, the fact that this man, who's clearly a suspect, goes to Africa and allegedly unalives this woman and then puts out this story of it being self-unalivement. It's not the first time we would see things like that happening, in that we've seen cases where Africans have been victims of certain things that have been done by certain white people, like the case that we covered not long ago with the Russian man who went to the African continent and was doing those things to those women and recording them without consent and then putting that on, online for people to see. So in a case like this, you have questions around what the Tanzanian authority is doing, what's going on, in Zanzibar. I've also heard that the owner of that particular place, and that's not where he proposed to her, because a lot of people think where he proposed to her, where the lion was, that was where she got unalive. No, they had actually left and gone somewhere else. And the owner of this place apparently is a white man too. And there are reports that suggest that this wasn't his first rodeo. McCann has been to that resort a couple of times, or is it a hotel? But anyway, he's been there a couple of times. People know him. The locals know him. There are allegations of him even doing things with women there. And this was what actually led to the drama that reportedly happened between him and Ashlee right before that unalivement happened. But yeah, so it's all just very sad. And I think for me, the big thing is when we're talking about this white worship, I would hate a case where a case like this goes unsolved. We hear these stories, everybody, there's a lot of noise around it and we all speak about it and things like that. But what actually happens eventually, like the Russian man, what has happened? I guess I need to go find an update on that. But the point is, if there is an update, it's not loud enough. It gets to a point where when people of color are treated a certain way, especially in Africa, on the African continent, the case somehow, gets all this buzz and then it goes unresolved. So I really hope that Ashlee's family gets justice for Ashlee. But yeah, it's all just very sad, Joe. And I pray that the Tanzanian government does right by Ashlee and just does what they can. I mean, they seized this passport and they held him for questioning. But we need to know what will happen beyond that. There's obviously a lot still going on, but I pray, I hope that Ashlee gets justice.
Absolutely. And those watching, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. Somebody mentioned that I want to make a comment here. I've realized that when an American, especially Black American, dies in Africa, is often out of, as if it's so strange, perhaps to feed a narrative. To be clear, I think what you're talking about is if they're unalived by an African or something happens on the continent of Africa. This is an American who was potentially, allegedly unalived by another American. And I think the reason why this story has gotten so much international, attention is because one of the nature of the relationship, right? He is an older, wealthy man. He's not, incredibly old, but he's older than her. He's a wealthy individual. He is of another cultural background, right? And so there are many conversations within that conversation. And then also the type of content she does, and she's an influencer, right? So these are all reasons that have led to this conversation. So it was done. I think that what Gloria was saying and what we're trying to get at is how people think that they can get away with doing these kinds of things on the continent, right? These aren't things that they do, or many people don't do back at home. They attempt to do the things that they cannot get away with at home, and they try to do it on the continent. We want to see people held accountable. To your point, Gloria, about the fact that there's a potential relationship between the owner of the resort they were staying in and him, just think about the circumstances here, right? They're investigating a possible self-deletion. How, though, is that the investigation, knowing that there are a couple things that are clear? There was an apparent argument, so loud that the people in the resort staying there called the authorities at the resort. The authorities then separated the two of them. Now, what they discovered when the authority, well, actually not the authorities, these are employees of the resort.
Right.
What they saw and what they discovered, we don't know, right? We just know that they decided to separate them. We don't know if there was any physical harm to either of the individuals. We don't know anything about what that staff saw that day. So I hope that with this investigation, they found out what the staff saw and they can get closer to the actual truth, because I think all of us watching the story are pretty clear that it doesn't seem like a self-deletion is likely considering the circumstances leading up to you know, the unalivement. So, you know, like you said, you know, there's a lot still to be uncovered, and it seems like there's some relationships and ties between this gentleman and the people of the resort, and maybe there was a potential for her finding out of some of his other activities at this resort potentially, which could have led to something. But as you could see, it was supposed to be a happy moment, right? It's a birthday and it was a proposal. So for a self-deletion after that seems unlikely. And I think, you know, we can all see what this is likely pointing to. So we will see, and we'll follow the story, and we'll keep you guys posted as we hear more information. All right, so moving from this story in Tanzania down to South Africa. So South African opposition leader Julius Malema is facing a possible 15-year sentence. He was actually sentenced to 5 years. I think the video that I originally had actually is, now that I'm looking at it, was it's a little bit older for the reason he was basically he was convicted of hate speech and firing a firearm in a 2022 rally, an EFF rally, so his own party rally. And he was sentenced to 5 years. So I do just want to get sentenced to 5 years. While I'm pulling up this video, because I'm realizing the video that I had was I want to get an updated video. Do you want to add any additional context? Well, I'll say a couple things actually. So one of the things that we'll know about Julius Malema is he rose to prominence internationally over the last couple of years because of his defiance of the current government in South Africa. Many times you'll notice, but that he would have fiery speeches in their parliament. He was very outspoken. His rallies, they would chant some of the older rallies that were chanted during the apartheid era. He has been someone who's been in the eye of Elon Musk, and Elon Musk would say that, you know, he should go to jail. He would repeatedly write on X that the president is meant to put him away, you know, all kinds of different things. And at one point in time, he was more searched than Ramaphosa, the current president of South Africa, by far. I mean, he was, you know, one of those people, and still is one of those people that I think people looked at as the guy who really was meant to bring change and to the continent. I think once Ibrahim Traoré came into power, I think he kind of became the person that most people look to for that, because he's actually in power. Whereas you know, Julius Malema's role is not the same as, like, he's not a leader of the country. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that before I find this video.
Sure. Maybe just some background would be a good place to start.
Sure.
But basically, as we all know. Oh, is it working now?
No, go ahead. No,
okay.
It's not working yet. We're almost there.
As we all know, and obviously, as Joe is referencing, Malema has been a very polarizing figure, and I'd say that as a compliment, because sometimes when you're fighting for people's freedom, it has to come with drawback.
Yes.
Noise. There are people who would not want it, and in his own case, as Joe has referenced, it's been on a global scale. I mean, we're talking Trump. Trump has referenced this man, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Elon Musk. There are people who have accused him of basically putting out narratives to go against the Afrikaner group, which is obviously white. But anyway, we know him to be the leader of the EFF, and feel free to interrupt me at any point, Joe.
Already now, yeah, whenever.
The Economic Freedom Fighters, he's the leader of that party, and that is the main voice of opposition right now in South Africa. At least it's the strongest and most popular, if you ask me.
Absolutely. So we'll play this video, and we'll have some more commentary on the thoughts on this particular sentencing.
After careful consideration, and I can show you I have done so, free of any interference, this judgment or sentence is the sentence of this court and this court alone. In respect of count 1, you are sentenced to a period of 5 years imprisonment. In respect of count 2, you are sentenced to a period of 2 years imprisonment. In respect of count 3, you are sentenced to 20,000 Rand or to undergo 6 months imprisonment. In respect of count 4, you are sentenced to 20,000 Rand or to undergo 6 months imprisonment. In respect of count 5, you are sentenced to pay a fine of 20,000 Rand or to undergo 6 months imprisonment. In terms of Section 280, subsection 2 of Act 51 of 1977, the court orders that the sentence imposed in respect of counts 2, 3, 4, and 5 run concurrent with the sentence imposed in respect of count 1.
Is the court please?
All right, so you heard it there. The sentencing had a number of different counts that he was found guilty of, and the total sentencing is 5 years because they're running concurrent, so meaning they all run at the same time. So it was like a few that were 6 months, one that was 5 years, one that was 2 years. Your thoughts on this story, Gloria?
Thank you, Joe. Of course, Malema and his team have consistently argued that the weapon, the firearm, was just a toy, and that the act was basically just it was intended for celebration, and the intention was not to hurt or cause any sort of harm. The intention was to energize the crowd. As we know, the court has found him guilty of 5 counts, including the unlawful possession of a firearm and ammunition, as well as reckless endangerment. What was particularly triggering in this case was the role of AfriForum. AfriForum is a lobby group that primarily represents Africana interests. And AfriForum actually happened to serve as the complainant. And obviously, this has now allowed Malema, this has now allowed Malema's legal team, this has now allowed actually the public and his supporters globally to frame this entire 8-year legal battle as politically motivated. And, obviously a battle that's been chased, or that has, received this level of attention because of the white minority interest. Under South African law, anyone sentenced to more than 12 months in prison without the option of a fine is disqualified from serving in parliament. This is really key. If this sentence is upheld on appeal, Malema would be forced to vacate his seat, which would potentially end the leadership or cripple, let me use the word cripple, cripple the leadership of the EFF, the economic, what's
Freedom
the term?
Fighters.
Freedom Fighters, thank you, Joe. This would cripple them significantly because, as we know, Malema is the face of the EFF.
Yeah.
And the EFF is the 4th largest political party ahead of future electoral cycles, but it's actually been able to position itself as the only voice for the dispossessed. And any threat to Malema's career is actually going to be seen, or is already being seen actually, as an attack on the aspirations of the Black working class. There are obviously a lot of arguments, and this is why I say, as usual, it's a very polarizing conversation. We all know the history of apartheid in South Africa, but those who are for the ruling insist that, he's a public figure and he should be, he should not be treated differently from other public figures. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't understand that, that could be endangering. However, there are people who are arguing, and I'm also disputing the fact that, come on, 5 years, a 5-year direct prison sentence is disproportionately harsh for an incident where there was no physical harm, there was no property damage that occurred. So now, it's making people also compare this sentencing to light sentences that have been given to high-level corruption cases and people involved in those cases. But anyway, now people are wondering, or people are saying, and that's what it's looking like, that now the law of South Africa, which, by the way, the magistrate, as you see, is a white woman, very ironic, and just makes you go back to the days of apartheid, and you know what I mean.
Sure.
It's just really eerie. But basically now it's as if the law is being used to neutralize a clearly vocal political opposition.
Yeah, and I also want to mention, you guys might remember Oscar Pistorius, the Olympian who had, and maybe I could just share really quickly share my screen so you guys can see who I'm talking about. This gentleman here. Now, he served 9 years in prison for unaliving this woman here, his wife, through the bathroom door. Sorry?
His girlfriend.
Sorry, his girlfriend. His girlfriend through the bathroom door. If I remember correctly, his excuse was he thought somebody was invading the house of some sort. And through the door, he shot and unalived his girlfriend. So his sentence was 9 years. And Julius Malema's sentence is 5 years. So let's just think about that. He shot a firearm in the air as a celebration, as part of a rally for a political party, and he is being asked to serve 9 years. Now, I showed the imagery of the Afroforum, just a quick Google search and Google image search of Afroforum. You can see what that group is comprised of. You can see in the imagery I just showed you who Oscar Pistorius is. Oscar Pistorius is. And you can see how, like in other places, there are two justice systems. And specifically in South Africa, you still see the remnants of a previous world still living today. And I find it to be really crazy to me that I see South Africans questioning Ghanaians. There's a viral video this last week, and they're focused on other Africans coming to the country and not really focused on this stuff, right? Like, I think this right here is where they should really focus their energy. These kinds of things. The one person that is fighting for you is potentially going to serve 5 years. Now, they are appealing this judgment. They're going to try to fight it and see what they can do. I don't know if anything will happen. He may end up serving those 5 years. And as you mentioned, the Economic Freedom Fighters, which has already lost senior members of its party to other political parties, and it seems to have been amicable. But I think many of them have left to go to other political parties. Some say because they're more likely to win. Some say just because they're tired of EFF, not making any progress in terms of its political strength. And it is something to be watching, because I think, this may end the party as we see it. He's been the face of the party for many years. We became aware of him. Many of us became aware of him over the last 4 or 5 years, but he's been the leader of the party for such a long time, and a leader in the party. And so it's a really sad, state of affairs. And so we will be watching this closely, and we'll keep you guys posted if anything changes, or if and when he does end up turning himself in, or what ends up happening. Because, there are any number of potential cases, things that can happen. So with that, we will move on to the next story. And the next one here is activist Kemi Seba faces extradition battle arrest in South Africa. So now this Kemi Seba is a controversial figure known for his anti-Western stance. He was arrested in South Africa, and authorities in Benin are now preparing an extradition request. So prosecutors accuse him of inciting a rebellion after he publicly supported a failed coup attempt in Benin in December of last year. So we will play this video and have some commentary on the other side. Apologies, let me get that video up on screen first.
Okay.
Here we go.
Activist is at the center of an international legal battle spanning multiple countries. Kemi Seba, a controversial figure known for his anti-Western stance, has been arrested in South Africa, and authorities in Benin are now preparing an extradition request. Prosecutors accuse him of inciting rebellion after he publicly supported a failed coup attempt in December. Seba appeared briefly in a Pretoria court, where he will remain in custody until a bail hearing scheduled for April 29th. Officials say investigations are ongoing into his travel documents, residency status, and alleged financial activities. The case has taken several twists. While initial claims suggested Seba had applied for political asylum, His advisor later denied that any such request had been filed. Seba is a vocal critic of France's influence in Africa.
Tone, why should
All right, so back to us. Gloria, your thoughts on this arrest and the potential extradition to Benin?
Yes, just to make it clear, there are a lot of headlines that are referring to Seba as an opposition leader. He actually does not lead a formal political party within the electoral system in Benin. He leads the NGO Urgences Panafricanistes or something like that. I hope I pronounced that right. My French is not very, very good. But anyways, influence is primarily through digital media and grassroots activism rather than the ballot box. But he's a very strong man. And if you ask me, he does, he's opposing the government. He's opposing France consistently. Anything, any interference by the West that, affects Pan-Africanism, Kemi Seba is actually one of the people who you will see on the front lines. So he's a very, very important figure in that regard. But let's talk about President Patrice Talon very quickly. That's obviously the president of Benin. He was once seen as a reformer, and that obviously is no longer the case. We all know about what happened with Nigeria's interference when Nigeria went to, with the help of France, they actually went to prevent a coup that happened actually, or was brewing in December 2025. And because Kemi basically said this was a day of liberation, described that failed coup as a day of liberation, he became a target. And Talon is very notorious for fighting opposition. Yeah, even if Kemi is not necessarily part of any opposition party, he's known for it. He's known to clamp down on democracy. In January of this year, his party seized all 109 seats in the National Assembly. His opposition figures like Rekia Madogu and Joel Aivo have actually been in prison, serving long sentences on charges that many have described obviously as politically motivated. And now you have Kemi, who's now being extradited to back to Benin. And Kemi has actually said he would prefer to be taken to Niger for obvious reasons, because he knows that he aligns more closely politically with Niger, the AES in general. And in 2024, he actually had his French citizenship revoked. And because of that, obviously because it condemns France and, any Western interference, because of that, now he's leaning more into pro-Russian narratives, where he's been seen, in a sense, as a bridge between Sahelian military regimes and anti-Western activists. So again, his role on the continent, when you talk about Pan-Africanism and things like that, his role is very important, even when you're talking about the AES. But anyway, as far as South Africa is concerned, it's now placed South Africa in a difficult diplomatic position, because now South Africa is going to have to balance its legal obligations and its bilateral relationship with Benin against the potential backlash from Pan-Africanist groups, because Seba, again, is a political prisoner at this point and is not a fugitive, or however they would like to label him. He's a political prisoner. And, South Africa, we have questions around your involvement in this case.
Yeah, because we don't see a reasoning from South Africa for the arrest, right? They said they're arresting, looking into certain things, but it wasn't as if he was arrested for crimes in South Africa, right? At least that wasn't what they stated publicly. So that's number one. So it seems clear that once they became apparent that the Beninese government was looking for him and that he was in South Africa, that they decided to arrest him. That is what it seems to be today. What you're seeing even with this story and the fact that there was a failed coup is the people of countries waking up to their leadership and their failed leadership in different countries, right? You're noticing that people are looking for military leadership to take over when that was not the case not too long ago. I think, Gloria, we've spoken about this on many occasions. Most people throughout time would have said they did not want military leadership. That's the general sentiment. There was always a small subset of people who would feel like they'd rather have military leadership. And you'll notice in certain, activist groups, they will take a military stance, they call each other comrade, etc. And I think there's a reason for that, right? Because they feel like they're fighting against imperialism. They're anti-imperialist. But that generally doesn't spill out into the general broad population, right? It's usually smaller groups. But when you see it growing to this extent, it tells you that something hasn't been working for a long time. What I am concerned about, though, is the way that an activist who's not even a political leader, even if he was a political leader, is treated and arrested for words that, yes, it was spoken as if he was in support of a failed coup, but it's not as if he was accused of being a part of it. He was just accused of supporting it in his language after it happened. And I think just by looking at that, that concerns me that they would arrest people like that. But what I respect is the bravery that these people have, and they continue to have, knowing that freedom of speech is not a right, and that they are at risk. But I think in order to get change, you need to have this kind of activism. It doesn't happen without it. So we'll continue to follow this story. We'll follow it from the South Africa angle, and what they determined the reason for the arrest was, which is, we'll see if they even have one. They may not even need to give one. They might just do it and extradite him. And then also what ends up happening to him when he gets to Benin, because that's the main concern, right? What ends up happening to this guy who has been an opposition voice of the opposition, what ends up happening to him. So we will keep a close eye on it. Okay, from there, we are moving now to joint effort between Uganda, Kenya, and Egypt. Sorry, it's been a long day already. And it's a new chapter in Africa's space ambitions that has begun. There was a successful launch of a joint climate monitoring system to the International Space Station. So Egypt, Kenya, and Uganda, as I mentioned, have collaborated on a first of its kind payload designed to capture the process real-time climate data directly from orbit. So the system will track floods, drought patterns, and agricultural stress using onboard artificial intelligence, offering faster and more precise insights than traditional satellite feeds. Now, it is supported through the international cooperation frameworks. The mission marks a shift from reliance on foreign space data to African-led climate intelligence, reshaping how the continent prepares for environmental and agricultural risks. So we will play this video and we will have some commentary on the other side.
A new chapter in Africa's space story has lifted off from Florida, and it is now heading to the International Space Station. In a historic first for the continent, 3 African nations, Kenya, Egypt, and Uganda, have built a climate camera that is orbiting around the Earth. It is a small device carrying a much bigger shift in how Africa sees its own future. The mission lifted off on the 11th of April 2026. A SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket carried the Cygnus NG-24 spacecraft into orbit from Cape Canaveral, Florida. And on board was a 3.5-kilogram payload called the ClimCam. By the 13th of April, the spacecraft had arrived in the ISS. Astronauts aboard used a robotic arm to capture it. Now, in the coming days, the ClimCam will be installed on an external platform. From there, it will spend the next year looking down at Africa. And by
all right, I will turn it over to you quickly to make this your thoughts on the story, and I will be right back.
Okay, so this is actually a historic milestone, and I love when we have milestones like this. I do like when we celebrate them because we don't want it to be all dark and gory all the time. But this is a huge milestone for African science because it's going to take us from being a consumer of satellite data to actually becoming a co-producer and owner of space technology. And this partnership by these 3 countries is necessary. I've always been a proponent, and I know Joe has been as well, of of Africa being able to, be sovereign, of Africa taking control and partnering within or among African nations. And a great way to actually maintain this sovereignty is for us to partner among ourselves. Now it sounds like I'm repeating myself, but it's for us to actually partner among ourselves. So I'm always happy when we have conversations around partnerships, regardless of the government in question, because obviously some of these governments, they have question marks around them. I mean, Uganda, Kenya, but it's a very important partnership, and we do need more partnerships like this in order for Africa to be sovereign. And when you're talking about artificial intelligence in this context, it's basically to help process weather and climate data in near real time. And the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs actually had this mission called Access to Space for All. So that was actually the antecedent for this mission. And one thing we need to make clear is that owning data, Africa owning its own data, is actually as important as owning the camera, because we also need to be able to control the eyes in the sky. And when we're able to do this, we're not having to rely on expensive and sometimes restricted data from Western or even Chinese commercial satellite providers. So in order for us to have food sovereignty, in order for us to have security in different countries, we do need to get to a point where we can actually also control the eyes in the sky. And, I want to make it very clear, a common misconception is that anything regarding space is a luxury. That, when it comes to developing economies, it's actually more of a luxury for us. Actually, that is absolutely incorrect. It's actually very necessary. It's not a luxury. We need regions that have been disproportionately affected by climate-induced droughts and floods could actually benefit from this. And while regionally, and I'd say even continentally, there's a lot of pride. I know I'm very proud of this endeavor, especially because of the 3 countries involved. I'm very happy for those countries. But I also want to point out that there's a lot of skepticism, again, the countries involved, and people are concerned, or if there is a concern, it should be around the data. What happens to that data? Is it going to be used for state surveillance, or are we going to use it purely for climate resilience as we're claiming we will?
Yes. I mean, yes. I think that is the major question I think many people are asking, right? How many things is it going to be used for? And the reason for those questions are this. So first, let me say, yes, what's really important is, when they talk about how representation matters, right? When you see something to be possible, it becomes possible for you. And so this mission shows other people around the continent what's possible in terms of inter-country cooperation, and also just thinking about, how do we solve broader challenges? A couple of things that give me pause. Number one, it was launched by SpaceX. So that's one. 2, it was launched from Cape Canaveral in Florida. That is in the United States, not on the continent of Africa. Those 2 things give me pause, right? Because the question that you asked is a good question. Is it for surveillance, or is it for just climate watching? And because, once you leave your country of origin and you give it to a company who has ties to another country, who sometimes has negative things to say about other countries near you, you start to wonder what other things they're utilizing this for, right? And so, there are a lot of questions that are going to be had here. And beyond all the things that I just mentioned, let's say none of that is a concern. One of the things that I do know that happens when it comes to climate change and carbon emissions is, it's interesting that the continent that is most impacted by the climate change is also the one that's meant to take the most changes, that it hasn't been the reason why it's impacted in the first place, right? So these restrictions on emissions and all kinds of other things, which I think are important generally, but they tend to be brought to a continent where they're working to catch up to utilize the same systems that the West are using or the global North are using. Yet they're held to restrictions that slow their growth where those restrictions weren't in place for other people. And so what I also hope this does not do is, a more charitable explanation is utilizing this to put further restrictions on them based on other climate changes and challenges, utilizing this data by the UN and others. So those are some of the concerns I have. I know there are a lot. But again, I think something like this, the important thing in terms of the youth on the continent, the future is seeing that it can happen.
Yes.
That I think is probably the most important thing, is that once you see something happening, it becomes true, it becomes possible to you. And I think that's the most important thing that I think. Okay, so there was a question about how long it's going to be in space. Some people are saying it's only 1 year. Is that enough time to be able to capture this information? I guess so. It's installation. It's a 30-day testing and then a commissioning phase. To that point, though, it is meant to be for a year. The consortium of countries is already discussing a potential second-generation mission, which will be called ClimCam-2, focused specifically on methane monitoring. And initial 1-year deployment is, if this initial 1-year deployment is successful, I think this is kind of just like a tests and a process to learn from and determine what to do next. So we'll keep a close eye on this and keep you all posted as things change and develop. All right. So now, in the interest of time, I think we have time for maybe one more story. And unfortunately, I don't think we'll be able to get to the Ibrahim Traoré story. Actually, we can. We have a little bit of time. So I can go past time a little bit, Gloria. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay. So because I do want to get to the Ibrahim Traoré story. Okay. So after being deported, so we're moving on now to Kinshasa. In the DRC, after being deported, deportees have now arrived in Kinshasa, from the U.S. under an agreement with the U.S. government. After being deported from America, around 15 people touched down in Kinshasa early last Friday under an agreement that the Congolese government did with the Trump administration. From what I understand, many of these folks are not just Africans. Many of them are not even from the DRC, obviously. And so we are going to play this video and have some commentary on the other side.
Being deported from the US, around 15 people touched down in the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo early Friday. It marks the latest episode in the Trump administration's strategy of using agreements with African nations to speed up migrant removals. Originally from Latin America, the deportees are set to stay in the country for a short period, according to US officials. All received legal protection from US judges, preventing them from being returned to their home countries. The International Organization for Migration will offer, quote, assisted voluntary return, which one US attorney described as, quote, alarming, given that the deportees spent months fighting hard to not have to go home. Earlier this month, Congo's government stated it will receive some migrants as part of an agreement with the Trump administration. It referred to the arrangement as temporary.
Latin American deportees in the DRC temporarily and with the option to return home. Your thoughts, Gloria?
Yeah, I want to emphasize, there is a recurring misconception that the people who get deported are criminals. And while some may have criminal histories, these are largely asylum seekers whose claims were rejected in the US, but who a US judge ruled could not be sent back to their original homes due to safety concerns, which I find very ironic. But anyway, yeah, I find it very ironic. You're just dumping. Anyway, but regarding Congo, this is the first physical manifestation of a controversial bilateral agreement between the Trump administration and the government of President Felix Tshisekedi. And it's controversial because you can't help but wonder about national sovereignty in all this conversation. You think about humanitarian ethics, you think about the use of resource diplomacy, basically to secure migration deals. You give them resources, they bring people to your country. That's basically the definition of that. And we've had deportees being sent to their country of birth historically, but under the 2025-2026 mass deportation strategy, the US is increasingly seeking safe third countries to host non-citizens. The DRC, despite its own internal security challenges, agreed to this role in exchange for what the Congolese Ministry of Communications has actually called logistical support and international solidarity, whatever that means. And you think about the Washington Agreement of June 2025, where the US actually mediated the peace accord between the DRC and Rwanda. And people are now wondering, is this some kind of quid pro quo for that diplomatic support? Is this for continued US investment in Congo's critical mineral sector? Of the 15 to 16 people who landed on April 17, none were Congolese, as we pointed out. These were people primarily from Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, and the Congolese government is describing this as temporary, but you're not giving a clear onward destination, and this has, obviously this is the reason we're all saying that we're wondering if you're being used as some kind of holding pen for US domestic policy. But it is, many people have criticized this as very dehumanizing. And as we know, again, the DRC is already struggling with its own internally displaced people. Are you really in a position to provide a safe asylum system for third country individuals? I think this is the big question.
Yeah, and I think you made a really astute point. They were denied asylum, but a judge also determined that they should not go back to their home countries for safety reasons. Denied asylum, but they can't go back to their home country for safety reasons, which is the reason why you actually apply for asylum. So, these questions are some of many, right? Like, why then would you deny them asylum? And obviously we have some answers to that. You guys, you understand it's the policy. The policy is to deny asylum to as many people as possible. Now, to this other point of sending them to the DRC, and then with the DRC having a policy that they could be sent back to their home country if they so decide. I don't know if they could send them anywhere else, but I think that the question that I have is this, if you are going to deny someone asylum, but then you're also going to deem it not safe for them to go to their home country, why would you send them to another country that's going to send them to their home country, right? It's just a way around it, as you mentioned. It's the easiest and simplest way for them to continue with their policy. So heavy-handed, quick solutions to policies that they have in place, which I think require nuance and long discussions that we don't have time for here today. But I will say it's disappointing to me that these deals continue to happen across the continent. It really is, because they were described as S-hole countries at one point in time, talked down upon for so long, and now they're doing deals with the people who detest them and call them all kinds of names, all in the face of selling their minerals. That is my thought on that. So moving on to Traoré. So finally, we have a generally positive story. It depends on who you are, I guess, but generally positive, just in terms of sovereignty on the continent. So now people were saying hopefully those satellites we talked about earlier aren't roaming over AES, which
Yeah.
was a point that somebody had made. Well, we're talking about the AES now, and you know, you're right. There are going to be some questions. So, really quickly, Burkina Faso's leadership under Traoré is moving to tighten its state control over key parts of the country with new steps targeting both gold and cotton sectors. I'm just going to play this video, and we'll have some commentary on the other side.
First gold, now cotton. Burkina Faso is moving to take control of its most valuable industries as Ibrahim Traoré is doubling down on his push for resource nationalism. Burkina Faso's government is now moving to sharply increase its stake in one of the country's biggest gold projects. Reports say the government wants to raise its stake in the Kiaka mine from 15 to 40%. Now, Kiaka is one of the country's biggest gold projects. It is expected to produce up to 280,000 ounces of gold every year. And it sits at the center of wider production target of nearly 500,000 ounces for 2026. Right now, the mine is majority owned by the Australian firm West African Resources Limited, with the Burkinabe state holding a minority share. But under Traoré, the government is no longer just asking for a seat at the table. It is demanding a larger cut of the profits to fund the state and its ongoing military operations. This push...
Interesting. Ongoing military operations. That's how it's described even by a South African news outlet. Your thoughts, Gloria, on this story in general, and then also that strange way of putting it. To fund the ongoing military operation instead of funding schools or the farming equipment or training farmers, which are the things that the military government is doing. It's saying ongoing military. So please, your thoughts.
Great job, Joe, catching that. And it's very important that we catch that. I mean, we have given compliments to First Post because of their neutrality when it comes to Traoré, and they often report more, you know, when we're talking about positive things that have come that are coming out of the AES in general. We have established the fact over and over again that when it comes to negative news, I can't overflow this enough. When it comes to negative news, the headlines are, you know, loud, they're all in your faces. But when it comes to positive stories like this, you almost have to go dig for those stories. And to think of a First Post, and I want to think that was maybe some editorial error in judgment, I don't know, or perhaps they couldn't resist using that label. I guess at the end of the day, I mean, I just want to point out, even though it's a South African presenter in that video, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to come too hard on First Post, but I'm just trying to say that certain things, I'm sorry, guys. I thought my phone is actually on silent. I guess my laptop rang out. I need to fix my settings on that. Anyway, certain things, when it comes to Africa, we really have to be able to be in a position to tell our own stories, because First Post is actually based in India. And at the end of the day, they can only do what they can do, but they're not us. And unfortunately, and that's not to say that even sometimes when it comes to our stories, sometimes our own media are actually also going with those narratives of things like, you know, emphasizing on military or emphasizing on dictatorship and things like that. So the bottom line, I guess the moral of the story is we have to get to a point where we're able to tell our own stories. We did not see enough. I don't even think we saw any other African medium necessarily covering this story as hard as they should. We need to prioritize, because the negative headlines are out there. We need to do our part to put out stories like this. But shout out to Ibrahim Traoré. Shout out to Burkina Faso. Congratulations. As always, we're not surprised. We're rooting for you. Yay, keep going.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I want to mention to folks that I just became aware of recently, and somebody who I disagree with on so many things made it clear. We agree on this one thing, and that is what you find is diaspora of certain countries that have made a killing, and I mean that in terms of revenue, off of taking money from government resources or resources that should go back to a country. And when a military coup takes over, they now become wealthy people in another country. So an example of this is Cubans in Miami, An example of this is many Persians, not all. This is, by the way, this is not all, but just many Persians in Los Angeles, and some of the former leadership from Burkina Faso, some of the former leadership from Mali, some of the former leadership from Niger find themselves in Cote d'Ivoire or France, and they lobby those governments against the military leadership. One, because their fortune has now been put at risk. And why I mention that is because, it underlines why sometimes there is so much negative news from a diaspora group about a country and coming from another country, right? You'll probably see a lot of people saying there's some support for opposition to the military leader because that support is coming from these people who used to live there and used to make a fortune from, off the backs of what should be going to their people. And it was something I became aware of as a common thread through all of these countries that end up under military leadership, is the former wealthy people that were there who now build political coalitions in the new country. And so I just want to make sure I point that out to you all. So if you hear, in the Iranian diaspora is very excited about what is happening right now in Iran, or if you hear people in France, or it's a smaller group, smaller numbers of people. Really early on, we saw this with Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso, that there was like a small resistance movement. These many times are former leadership or former wealthy individuals from within a country. And so, I think that answers the question as to why a lot of times you see negative news about these military leaders who take over, because you have a lobbying coalition in another country. Now, with that being said, I did just point out that line. Generally, as you said, they do a pretty good job of reporting on things that, even positive things that aren't very often reported by anyone else, including other people on the continent. We at one point in time with Africa, with This Week in Africa, we posted mostly African Stream content, right? And we were responding to African Stream under a previous iteration of this show. And then obviously African Stream was shut down and we had to pivot. And so Gloria and I go through pains trying to find videos on stories that we can respond to and we can bring to you all. And it's very difficult because there aren't a lot of outlets that report on these stories, especially that have firsthand reporting. So when we're bringing you kind of the headlines and the things that we think you should focus on, it's not easy to find, right? Especially a video reporting on it, especially, it just becomes difficult. And many times you find angles that we do not necessarily agree with on how to, and how it's being reported. So, that's why you see a lot of first post news. And so, like I said, shout out to them generally for posting these things. It's just that the way that was framed, I had to call that out specifically.
Well done, Joe.
Yeah. So anyway, with all that being said, we will continue to follow what's going on with Ibrahim Traoré in country as he continues to take more control of the natural resources and reinvest that into the country. And we like to share that information for those of you who are interested in politics, moving into politics, know anybody in politics, and who specifically spend time, involved in politics in other countries, so that there are ideas that can be shared with other politicians that might help the country that you're in. This gentleman says we don't know how to do research. Please, if you have other places that report on African stories and have videos, please share. Please share in the comments. We'd love to see the stories that you find. And by the way, we mean like with actual journalistic integrity, not talking heads from the internet, because we want to make sure we're using people who use sources and who report on things in a way that can be conceptualized and brought to you. So just making sure that you understand that. But yes, please do share if you've done your research. Not chat GPTing it or perplexitying it, but if you have like actually a story, we'd love it. Please share. Please share. All right. So with that, I think we'll bring this to a close. Any final words, Gloria, from you?
Yeah, there are journalists in Sudan and DRC in the hotspots. Look up their names, contact them, and they will give you probably a video call interview and you can hear it for yourself. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Sorry, Joe, I just need to address this. But see,
Yeah.
when we're talking about videos that have already been created, maybe if we can have them make it readily available, because the internet is a wide space. You know, African Stream was on social media, you know, and Joe partnered with. So if we can get more visibility from them, it would be very easy for us to find them and we would happily use them. But again, if you have recommendations on sites and links and things like that, let us know. You know, we appreciate the feedback, regardless of how harsh it is, but it's all good. But anyway,
no, wait, send their names. Send their names.
Yes.
You know, if you have a criticism, if you have a criticism, do the actual thing. Don't just criticize. Give a solution. So send their names and their contact, and if you could find where their contact information is, we would happily bring them on to talk about Sudan specific stories for sure. And then we more than happy to do that. We've done that in the past where we've had other people come on and speak to stories specific to their country. But again, we're looking for videos to utilize, right? So if they have videos that they can use, and then we can have them report on those videos, or we can have them report on the story directly here. We'd love to do that. But that's just Sudan, right? And there's a lot going on in Sudan, but you know, there are 54 to 56 countries, depending on who you are on the continent. And so with that being the case, we would need more of those folks across all those places. And we also have to try to get to them within a week, between all the other stuff that we're doing, right? And we have to, so we come up with our stories and then we bring them on. So any suggestions you have beyond those in Sudan as well, please send them over and we're more than happy to review them. All right, sorry, I cut you off, Gloria.
That was my final word. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We appreciate you, and follow Joe Hotagwa everywhere. Go buy, he has some amazing t-shirts on AuthenticAfrican.com. I can't wait to cop mine. I know I've been procrastinating, but go check out his website. It's rich.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. Yes. I mean, on that note, I might as well, you know, we got some new merch that's out. If you guys are supportive of Ibrahim Traoré and the work he's doing, you know, I think that's one thing I would recommend you take a look at. Oh, sorry, there was a comment promoting Africa as an uphill battle against Western media, and Thursdays are a highlight in my week. I love y'all. Thank you, Jada. Appreciate it, Jada. You know, you've been a great support, so we appreciate you. I'm trying to figure out how to share my screen. I don't even know how to do. Oh, I know what I could do. Here's what I'll do. I'll share the entire screen so you guys can see this. So here's some of the examples of some of the merch. Since Gloria brought it up, I might as well share it here. So here we go. So this is what some of the merch looks like. If you're interested, we have the Stolen From series that is getting uploaded this weekend. The AES shirts are already out. So if you want to support AES, you can support the AES. And then on the back, it tells the story of the AES. And on the back, it'll tell the story of the Nefertiti bust and how it was taken from Egypt, and here the Benin bronzes and how they were taken from Nigeria. So if you're interested in you know, showing some love to any countries where things were stolen from, or there's a before slavery with the Moors, there's a cool image on the front and some education on the back. If you just go to AuthenticAfrican.com, scroll down to the merch section, you'll see the shirts there, or you can click on shop in the menu and it'll take you directly to the shop. I also have a shop link in the description on YouTube as well, so that you can go to shop.com and find it there as well. But yeah, you can support it. So I appreciate you mentioning that, Gloria. And yes, follow Gloria at Diaspora Station and the Gloria Ayo, and follow Authentic African on all platforms. I know you just sent in the chat. Send us emails or DMs, because I can't copy out of the chat and paste it anywhere. So this was T-Pose until World War III. Until okay.
He loves to. No, I'm kidding. Email us or DM us. That way we can converse with you. And
yeah, and then we can copy and paste it too. I can't do it from the chat because of the way it works. doesn't
Yeah.
allow me from this platform to copy and paste it. I could try, but it'd be
Yeah.
better if you could email us. Thank you though for those recommendations. All right, and with that, thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you all on the next live stream. Bye, guys.
Bye.